So here's my final and powerful tip. It's something that we teach as standard at Celebrant Training School, but I know that sadly it's not standard practice with many funeral celebrants. Hi and welcome to Celebrant Training School. If you're dreaming of having a successful career as a wedding or funeral celebrant, then you're in the right place. I'm David Willis, the founder and principal trainer of Celebrant Training School, and my mission is to help you build a successful celebrant business with practical skills and strategies that work. Now on this channel, we will share with you tips, insights and practical advice to guide you every step of the way, whether you're thinking of starting out as a celebrant or if you're looking to grow your existing celebrant business. Now don't forget to hit the subscribe button and to turn on the notifications so that you never miss any new videos. Let's start straight away with our topic for the day. In this video, we're going to be focusing on one of the most important aspects of being a professional funeral celebrant, and that's writing a eulogy. Now, some families like to write their own eulogy. After all, they knew the person who has died the best, and it's a wonderful personal tribute to be able to write and deliver a eulogy for someone that you've loved. However, many families don't feel able to write a eulogy. And so it's for this significant reason why they employ a professional funeral celebrant so that you can write and deliver the eulogy for them. Now in this video, I'll guide you through all the tips and techniques that celebrants need to use to write a great eulogy. These are the same principles that we teach and assess at the Celebrant Training School. Now we work with our trainees on a one-to-one basis to ensure that they have developed all the skills to do this really effectively before they ever work with any real bereaved families. Getting this skill right is an essential part of being a successful funeral celebrant. So stick with me until the end, where I will share with you a simple but powerful method of ensuring that every eulogy that you write is deeply personal and meaningful. So let's start with the basics. A eulogy is a personal tribute which celebrates the life of a person who has died. Now, whilst of course it will include the recounting of facts and achievements, a great eulogy is more about the telling of a person's personal life story in a way that feels deeply meaningful and reflects the true person that they were. Now, for families, the co-creation of a eulogy with a professional celebrant can be a great source of comfort and support in their time of grief. Helping people to remember and to reflect on happy memories and a person's legacy can help a spouse and the family move on from having an overwhelming feeling of loss and regret. The first step in writing a eulogy is, of course, gathering all the information that you need. This begins with an effective meeting with the next of kin and any immediate family. It requires skilled and active listening. Now, when you sit down with a bereaved family, it's important that you have a clear structure for the meeting. As a professional celebrant, your meeting should be efficient and effective, because for the next of kin, it is often a difficult and an emotional experience. The family need you to be a professional who they can trust, who will lead them efficiently but sensitively to get all the information that you need to write a personal and meaningful eulogy for them. For new funeral celebrants, doing their first next of kin meeting for the first time can often feel overwhelming. You need to be empathic, organised, thorough and taking plenty of notes. A checklist can help, but practicing and developing your skills in a safe learning environment with a tutor before you are let loose on the general public is really appreciated by our graduates and the funeral directors who book them. Now, it's important to ask good open questions in the meeting to get the family talking meaningfully about the person who has died. Things like, what were they passionate about? How would their friends or family describe them? What were their proudest moments or proudest achievements? what made them laugh or smile. It helps with note-taking if the conversation goes through the person's life chronologically. But of course, you're not just trying to get the surface level facts. What we're really looking for are those moments and those stories that bring their personality to life. So pay attention to recurring themes such as their kindness, their sense of humour, or their love of a particular hobby or passions. These will shape your conversation, and ultimately it will help you to personalise the eulogy. Next, let's talk about structure. A well-organised eulogy is easier for families to follow and it's more impactful. Here's a simple structure that you can use. First of all, as a way of introduction, briefly summarise the main and universally accepted description of the person who has died, their qualities and character, in perhaps no more than 1 or 2 sentences. For example, Brian was a devoted husband and dad. He was loyal to his family, his friends, and he was a passionate United fan. Then move on to tell their life story, starting right at the very beginning with when and where they were born and who their parents were and their siblings. Then move through and share key milestones, achievements, and relationships throughout their life. Now, although it is a lot easier to do this chronologically, alternatively, you can instead focus on themes like family, work, and hobbies. Now, to make the eulogy really personal, include lots of personal stories and anecdotes that the family have shared with you. Families often enjoy sharing their own funny stories of the deceased. These are really important to capture at length, and these are also the stories that you should really tell very well on behalf of the family in the eulogy. When closing the eulogy, it's important to briefly and sensitively describe the moment of death. Now, not all families want celebrants to talk about the moment of death in the eulogy. It could, after all, be far too painful for them to be able to hear that. However, on the whole, it is fitting and appropriate to tell a person's final chapter in the story of their life. It doesn't have to be detailed, and it certainly shouldn't be graphic, but it should be succinct and dignified. Now, keep the structure of your eulogy simple, and of course find your own personal style. But always remember to keep in mind the audience to whom you are talking to. Remember, is it inclusive of all the key family members and friends who will be listening? Will they recognise the person that you are talking about? If the answer is yes to both of those questions, then you're on the right tracks to writing a great eulogy. So how can we avoid some common pitfalls? There are some common pitfalls when writing a eulogy. The first one is to be using cliches and bland phrases. So always instead be very specific about details that you're told. For example, Doris loved nothing more than tending to her garden, and her roses were the envy of her neighbours. Also, be very aware of your own unconscious bias when you are writing a eulogy for somebody that you don't know. Sometimes the next of kin and the family may leave gaps in what they tell you. Maybe it's gaps in how they felt about certain situations. And when this sort of thing happens, very often the celebrant sometimes fails in the meeting to clarify their understanding of what is said, what has happened, and how people feel about it. A well-intentioned a funeral celebrant in these circumstances is human if they then fill these gaps with their own unconscious bias and assumptions. This can be potentially very dangerous and a disaster. For example, a father might have died when a child was young, and the funeral celebrant might decide to write about how this was sad and very tragic, even though the next of kin didn't actually use any of those words. For all they know, the father who had died might have been a drunk, might have been abusive of the family, and although that wasn't mentioned, the well-intentioned funeral celebrant can easily misrepresent a situation through lack of information and by using their unconscious bias. It illustrates again the importance of getting the next of kin meeting right. It sometimes is not what is said, but what is not said, which tells you more. If in doubt, a well-trained professional funeral celebrant will only include information, feelings, and values that are specifically shared by the family that they have met. In the worst cases, a funeral celebrant can come across as inaccurate, pompous, presumptuous, and over-familiar with a person that they've never met. Now, there are some great funeral celebrants out there, but sadly, there are also many poorly trained ones. And maybe you've been to a funeral where you've observed a celebrant like this. When writing a eulogy, it's important not to dwell on the negatives, although being honest and accurate is also important. People often face challenges or conflicts in their life. Things like addiction, divorce, or personal tragedy. And yet difficult key moments in life shouldn't overshadow the positive memories that the immediate family will want to be able to cherish. Painful periods in a person's life should always be acknowledged, albeit briefly, and with sensitivity. After all, this is an important part of being authentic and accurate. Now, you also need to make sure that you keep the eulogy concise. It shouldn't last any longer than 6 or 7 minutes. This is normally enough time, plenty enough time, to be able to convey a person's life story in a dignified way without losing the audience's attention. If it looks like the eulogy is going to go on longer than 7 minutes and it can't really be edited out without missing any significant stories or significant events, then you should be chunking down the eulogy into 2 shorter chapters, and then perhaps having a musical interlude in between. In contrast, if there is very little to say about a person's life, and the eulogy, when you've written it, it's very, very short, don't worry. It is much better to deliver a short, accurate, and dignified eulogy than to pack out a short eulogy with lots of platitudes and cliches. It just sounds disingenuous. Now, getting the tone in a eulogy right is also essential. The best eulogies have a balance between warmth and sincerity and moments of lightness. Humour, when used appropriately, can lift a funeral service, and it brings comfort to grieving families. If, when you're in their front room, the family are in stitches telling you funny stories about the deceased, then this is your sign to write the eulogy, including as many of these laughs. However, always let the family's own tone and their own stories guide you on this. There are some funeral celebrants who, like stand-up comedians, will often say the same joke in every funeral so they get a laugh. Now, this might be a style that is favoured by some, and it might be in demand by a few families. But very often, when a community has seen the same joke told many times in many funerals, it can actually just diminish the celebrant's work to a professional entertainer. Now, with the eulogy written, the final step is preparing to deliver it as part of the overall funeral service. Whereas the introduction, the committal and the closing words of a funeral service may be very similar in all the funeral services that you deliver if you're a busy professional funeral celebrant, the eulogy, however, is always unique, and it's the most powerful aspect and the most personal aspect of a funeral service. It's important then to get the delivery right. So here are a few practical tips for making your delivery impactful. First of all, practice reading the eulogy out loud to get comfortable with it, with your pacing and your flow. It's important also to annotate the eulogy if you think this helps, and remember that no one else will actually see your script, so make it right for you. It's important to speak clearly and slowly and to pause where appropriate when you're delivering the eulogy. This is because people who are in an emotional state generally take longer to process what you're saying. It's common for us as public speakers to perhaps speak a little bit faster than we would normally do because we're nervous, but when we do this, we can often give the impression that we're in a rush, and for funeral celebrants, it might give the impression that we're just trying to get through this funeral to get off to do our next job. Next, giving good eye contact is really important if you want to have a genuine human connection with the audience. In particular, look to the immediate family and to friends when you mention them by name in the eulogy. Remember, not only are you talking to them, but you're also holding their grief. You are also talking for them. Lastly, try to be authentic. Don't put on a posh speaking voice, but instead try to sound as conversational as you possibly can. Families want you not only to be authentic, they of course want you to be professional, but they want you to be human. If you feel yourself at any point getting emotional, just pause, take a breath. What you do is important, and it's really special. And families understand that a celebrant is human. So here's my final and powerful tip. It's something that we teach as standard at Celebrant Training School, but I know that sadly it's not standard practice with many funeral celebrants. After you've written a draft eulogy, we insist that you share this fully with the next of kin so that they can check it and make as many changes as they like. Now, often families don't want to make any changes, but it is really useful to get them to check the details to make sure that there aren't any misunderstandings or any unintentional errors or typos. It also gives the immediate family an emotional rehearsal of what is often the most difficult parts of the funeral service that they're going to be hearing. Arranging a funeral service for a loved one is a stressful time. And so if you give the family prior insight into looking at the funeral, it can help to settle their nerves. In addition, there is also perhaps additional stories or additional details that they may want to add into the eulogy at a later stage after they've had a couple of nights' sleeps. Grief can play tricks on memory, and so by being additionally supportive in this way, you're giving them this opportunity to add details if they choose. Now, there are some great funeral celebrants out there, but we unfortunately hear all the time of funeral celebrants who have read an unchecked eulogy and they've got names wrong, dates wrong, places wrong. Or in the worst case scenario, they are completely misrepresenting someone's character. The celebrant who reads an unchecked eulogy risks sounding unprofessional, pompous, and arrogant. And discerning funeral directors never book them twice. Now, writing a eulogy is one of the most rewarding parts of being a funeral celebrant. It's creative, challenging, and varied work. Delivering a well-researched, well-crafted eulogy is something that is truly special, and it is key to not only supporting grieving families, but also to being a successful funeral celebrant. So, good luck. Now, if you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your own tips and experiences of writing eulogies, and perhaps also those good and bad experiences of hearing them from other celebrants too. Remember, hit the bell icon if you want notifications of when the next video will drop, and I'll see you next time.